Managers have more of an influence on people's quality of life than their therapists and their spouses. The phrase that I use a lot is that managers define reality for their employees. Whether you like your job or not, whether you're productive or not, whether you're happy or not, inside and outside of work often comes down to the manager. Something to be conscious of.
This sounds like a stupid question.
Probably is, because, yeah, go ahead. Skilled managers equals high morale, which equals all that cool stuff that you cannot pay for and you can't punish for.
When you close off that feedback channel, you are not going to be able to hear the truth.
In the first microseconds, your brain can't tell the difference between physical danger and what we call social danger.
I mean, I'm pissed off at you.
Me, specifically?
Well, just because you're my boss and all.
Employees tend to get promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. Go forward and don't suck.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Welcome to the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. Thanks for joining us today. And when I say us, unfortunately for you all today, we don't have my co-host, Mr. Mike Nash. However, fortunately for you all, I have a guest on the show today that I'm really excited to talk to. So I want to welcome to the show, Mr. Eric Girard. Now, Eric Girard is the CEO of Girard Training Solutions. Eric has over 30 years of experience helping improve the performance of managers and employees. He specializes in the development of new managers, focusing on their successful transition to their new role and on their team management skills. He has a high energy and engaging facilitation style. Now, Eric is a passionate lifelong learner. As a PADI open water scuba instructor, PADI, P-A-D-I, he is pursuing the rating of Master Scuba Diver Trainer. Yes, Master. Now, when not designing or delivering his terrific trainings, those are my words there, he enjoys spending time outdoors with his wife and twin 14-year-old daughters. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. I know that we have similar interests, similar career pursuits, and generally sounds like we play in some of the same sandboxes of life. You know what? Let's start off, Eric, by talking about what's probably most important to me and our listeners, which is scuba diving, if you don't mind. How the heck did you get into that? I always like to know these stories.
Yeah, so it started out, I was bored one day walking around Sydney and wandered into a dive shop in 1998. And the salesman I talked to must have been pretty good because I'm still diving in 2023. So yeah, I got certified as a diver in Sydney way back when. And when I was on a trip to Hawaii, a buddy of mine and I were celebrating our 50th birthdays, diving the Molokini crater off of Maui. And I thought, you know what? I got to do more with this. And so I decided to make a mad dash and got certified as a dive master and then an instructor. And my goal is by 2030, I want to be teaching scuba someplace tropical. So I'd like to be retired or semi-retired in 2030 and hanging out on an island or maybe in Costa Rica or something, teaching people how to scuba dive.
Amazing, amazing. So as one does, wandering around Sydney, getting bored, decides to do some scuba diving. I'm sure we can all relate to that, can't we?
You know, it as you do, you know.
Well, any crazy stories, like exciting scuba diving stories or anything wild happened to you in your pursuit of this?
My favorite all-time dive was one in Monterey, California, where I was diving at a place called Breakwater Cove, which is very well known to divers down there. It's where a lot of people learn how to dive. And it's just a great place to dive because it's a marine sanctuary. So I'm swimming along and a juvenile sea lion swims up to me and looks at me and swims away. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then about 5 minutes later, he came back with 4 or 5 friends. And all these juvenile sea lions were playing and doing loop-de-loops and blowing bubbles in my face and just having a ball. And I had my GoPro, so I got it all on video. And that was just a great dive. So I've just decided that my spirit animal is a sea lion.
I love it. I love it. Eric, I'm wondering, obviously with your focus on developing new managers was something that really caught my eye when I explored your work. Would you mind just letting our audience in a little bit more on your, background as well as your intellectual and career pursuits? And I would love it if you could also talk a little bit about your incredible book at this point as well. So I'll let you like to go.
So I'll start at the beginning. I've been in learning and development my entire career, which at this point is over 30 years. And I got the bug for wanting to teach people stuff when I was in the Boy Scouts. When I was a teenager in the Boy Scouts, I was working on the waterfront of my local Boy Scout summer camp, and I was teaching kids how to swim, paddle a canoe, row a boat. And it just lit something in me. And I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. So I wound up with a couple of degrees in learning and development and eventually landed in Silicon Valley doing management development. So I did that for 20 years in Silicon Valley. And I worked for places like Apple, Applied Materials, Symantec, some heavy hitters in the tech space. And when the pandemic hit, with my wife and I looked at each other and said, you know what, Silicon Valley is a stupid place. And no offense to anybody who still lives there, but we could not do the crowds. We could not do how expensive it was. It's just too frenetic. And we wanted to get out of Dodge. And she had secretly been plotting this day. And she's like, well, I have a realtor in the Seattle area, and he'd be happy to show us some properties. So long story short, we wound up moving up here, buying a house. I started this company because I didn't have another job search in me. I decided I'd hang out my own shingle. She got a new job and started a side hustle, and I became certified as a scuba instructor all before the end of 2020. And I just decided that I was going to make it my life's work to help new managers transition from being an excellent individual contributor, whatever that is, an excellent engineer or an excellent financial analyst or a great architect, and help them transform into being a great people manager, because they're entirely different skills. And I have a real passion for people who are new at things. I have a real passion for new managers. I think that everybody deserves a great manager. And I decided it was going to be my job in life, my mission in life, to make that happen for as many people as possible. And as part of this, I wrote a book. I took the 30 years of knowledge and wisdom that I've gathered over the years. I often say that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, because if you look at the references of my book, there's so many works that I've quoted and cited. But I decided to put together something that was accessible, that's easy to read, that's not too thick, but that takes a new manager on the journey from, hey, I just got promoted, or I'm thinking about taking a job as a manager, everywhere from building empathy and how to become a more empathetic human being, all the way through to managing change and how to lead a team through change and everything in between, how to set goals, how to delegate, how to coach, how to provide feedback, just what I call the basic blocking and tackling of managing. That's all covered in the book, and it's something that I loved writing, and I'm determined to get it into as many hands as possible.
Love it. I love it, and I've been able to glance at the book. I know I have a copy on the way, which I'm excited to dive into it, because I've paid attention to your other just great resources and materials that you have up on your website, from your podcast to a lot of cool resources there. And so you touched on this a little bit, Eric, but I'm curious, why did you choose to focus on new managers? Like what motivated you to get into this space? If there's anything deeper than, hey, everybody deserves a good manager, which I totally agree with. But I'm curious if there are some other motivations behind that from your experience.
Oh yeah, there's a whole origin story around that. So in my career, I observed people being promoted from, sometimes they were my peers, or I noticed other individual contributors in other groups being promoted from being a doer to being a leader. So you're an instructional designer, now you're going to lead the instructional designers, or something along those lines. And I would often be the recipient of that new manager who was unprepared, untrained, a decent human being, but not well informed on how to run a team, and it would not go well. So I've had a few experiences with managers who got promoted and turned into different people, and it wasn't a nice experience. So I paid attention to that, and I'm like, this isn't good. And then in a stroke of irony, when it was my turn to get promoted, I did everything wrong as well. So it's like I didn't learn from the mistakes of other people. I had to go and make my own mistakes, and I made a complete hash of it. Just made a huge mess of it. And so I walked away from that experience thinking, okay, never again. That's never going to happen to me or anybody else again. And that's why Girard Training Solutions exists.
I did appreciate you showing up with a bit of vulnerability there. I think most self-aware new managers, sometimes in hindsight, can remember that first management job or first couple management jobs and be like, yeah, I made some mistakes. I had some missteps. I certainly had plenty myself. Would you mind sharing maybe some of those, mistakes that you made in your first management or management positions, and maybe what you learned from those?
Yeah. There's a story that I tell a lot. And the name of this story is Hook 'em Horns. And the way it works is I had been promoted over two people who were originally my peers. And suddenly I'm their manager. And so I came in and I was going to rebuild the department, and things were going to go right under my watch. It was going to be excellent. And one of the folks who reported to me had actually been making some fairly serious mistakes on a project that they were on. And so I was asked by my boss to watch this person closely. So I did. I watched them like a hawk. I was over their shoulder and in their business all the time. And one of the things that happened was they sent an email to this project team, a very senior level project team. There were CXOs on this project team and vice presidents and directors. It was a heavy hitting group. And he wrote this terribly written email. And at the end of it, he ended it with, "Oh, and by the way, hook 'em horns." And I just came down on them like a ton of bricks. I nitpicked the bejubers out of that email. I picked up every grammatical error. I picked up every syntax error. And then I went on for a paragraph about hook 'em horns. What the heck is hook 'em horns? That makes no sense to me. It's offensive, and I think that you shouldn't have said that. Are you a football fan?
Only if we're talking about the Seahawks.
No.
Yeah.
So Seahawks are awesome, but that's not what this person was referring to. This person sat in Austin, Texas, and the University of Texas Austin team is the Longhorns. Mm-hmm. And the way that you cheer the Longhorns is you say, "Hook 'em horns." I am obviously not a football fan. I had no clue. So of course I came down like a ton of bricks on this person and said that was inappropriate. They wrote back and said, "We're all UT Austin fans, and the Longhorns are playing this weekend."
Uh-oh. Yeah.
I was the only person who was out of that loop. And I made a complete jackass of myself. So whenever somebody does something that irritates me or isn't my preference, but isn't that big of a deal, the thing that I try to remember to say to myself is hook 'em horns. In other words, let it go. Just let it go. Because that completely destroyed the relationship I had with any relationship that I did have with this person. It was gone. The trust was gone. The respect was gone because I had nitpicked to the point of being obnoxious.
Yeah. Hook 'em horns. So that's a great story and a great illustration, and certainly something I can relate to. And I think many new managers or old managers can resonate with, right? There's a fine line there, right? There's a fine line between what can I just let go of and what is worth, the squeeze, in a sense. Like, what is the issues that need to be addressed? And of course, that's the challenge that's front and center with a lot of managers. What do I do and what do I not pay attention to?
Right. And there were plenty of things that this person was doing that were really inappropriate. But that was not one of them. And I had some confirmation bias going where I was like, okay, if this person opens their mouth, then whatever they're saying must be wrong. Right. That was completely unfair. I was throwing them in the idiot bucket, and that was not fair. That was not appropriate. And it ruined any chance of us having a productive relationship.
Yeah. Gosh, well, we could probably swap stories of early management days, missteps. But Eric, I'm interested in exploring something with you, and let me lead off with just acknowledging something you said earlier in this conversation, which is that, I'm paraphrasing here, right? But the skills that made you great at whatever job you were doing are not the same skills that are going to make you great at management. Some of our management workshops, we reference the Peter Principle on this, right? People tend to rise to their level of incompetence, which is a pretty snarky thing to say, but it's been observed in almost every single organization, right? That was the principle. And so the same exact thing happens to management in almost every single organization I see, which is, you're a really great salesperson, so now we're promoting you to be the manager of salesperson. And it's like, welcome to management, good luck, right? And so I'm really excited that there's people like you out in the world that are helping new managers through this Peter Principle syndrome. So here's a scenario I want to play around with. Imagine this. So I just got promoted to be a manager of a team, right? And this is my first ever management position. Now I'm excited. New management position seems like a big deal for me. Now I start this new management job in, say, 60 days. So I got 2 months to prepare for this job. What should I be doing during this time to get myself as prepared as possible in order to thrive in this role as a manager of people? Like, what skills should I be developing? How should I prepare myself psychologically? Like, what should I be doing in these 60 days?
Yeah. Well, first off, you're lucky that you've got 60 days, because most people don't get that much time.
Right.
In that 60 days, you've got quite a lot of runway. So congratulations. So first off, look at the positive side. You've got a lot of time to set yourself up well. The first and longest chapter in my book is about empathy. And I rely heavily on Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence to talk about the importance of being a more empathetic human being and being an excellent listener. So in 2023, when we're recording this, there is so much mayhem. For better or worse, I subscribe to the New York Times, and anything you see above the fold is mayhem and chaos in the world. So folks are overwhelmed with what's going on in the macro environment. Things are crazy in their jobs, in their day-to-day jobs. Home life is sometimes chaotic for folks. And so you never know what somebody is dealing with when they come to work. And so I think building your empathy muscles, and you don't have to be an empathetic person to begin with. You can build those empathy muscles. You can do some reading. You can start to put yourself into higher and higher stakes situations to build empathy with people that you normally wouldn't hang out with, say. But that's the first condition, I think, is that as a manager, you need to be an empathetic human being. Not that you become a therapist, not that you become a counselor, but that, you can be an excellent listener and really walk a mile in somebody's shoes to understand where they're at in order to help move them to where they need to be in order to perform properly at their job. The second thing I think folks need to do is make that psychological transition from I am an individual contributor responsible for tasks to I am a leader responsible for getting results through others. That's a huge shift, and one that a lot of new managers don't make. And as a result, they don't delegate, which is the next thing that you need to know how to do, is delegate really well. If you can't delegate, then you become the bottleneck, you become the problem. And that's a bad place to be. So you need to build your empathy muscles. You need to make that psychological transition from I get rewarded for doing things, for doing tasks, to I get rewarded for getting results through other people. And then we need to learn how to delegate. And I would say that if a manager can do those three things in their first 30 days, they're doing pretty well. There are several other skills I talk about in my classes and in my book. But if you just want to start eating the elephant a bite at a time, I would start with those three.
Terrific. So empathy, psychological transition, and then as a child of psychological transition, delegation, right? And delegating does not mean abdication, and delegating does not mean that you're giving away all your work, but you just can't do it all anymore. And so you have to rely on the brains in your team. Yeah. I'm right with you on that. Well, maybe Eric, let's start with empathy. And I really appreciate, again, just in the work that I've seen of yours, your focus on emotional IQ. Again, that's a lot of overlap in what we focus on in our Managing with Mind and Heart program. One of kind of my favorite definitions of emotional IQ, and I'm going off of memory here, but the ability to recognize your emotions and others and then make good choices based off that information. Right. And so in our workshops, we then talk about adaptive skills, and how we define adaptive skills are those good choices that you make based off of the recognition of your emotions and others. And one of those being showing up with empathy and listening, like listening in a way so people feel cared about and respected. So all of that said, from your perspective, from your experience, and from what you bring into the world, like I can understand that empathy is important intellectually, right? But how do I develop my empathy skills? Like, where would I start with that? Would it be that listening piece and developing that skill to listen so people feel cared about and respected, or would you start somewhere else?
Well, I think listening is super important for sure. And in the book, I talk about 3 levels of listening, everywhere from where I'm listening to you and immediately trying to figure out what I'm going to say as soon as you shut up.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's that level.
I'm doing that right now.
I can tell it's very offensive. But there's, that first level of listening, which is I'm just listening to respond. I'm just listening to try to figure out what witty thing I'm going to say at the end of when you put a period on that sentence, all the way down to really understanding where you're coming from, understanding your heart, understanding your mind, and not being in such a rush to respond, but to do something with the information that you've heard beyond just responding. So taking some sort of action, for example. Listening, I think, is an important skill. And then as far as empathy is concerned, you can build empathy in small steps. So it's not like you suddenly have to become Mother Teresa or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that. But for example, can you put yourself in situations you wouldn't normally and try to really understand the people that you're around? So for example, maybe reading articles in a magazine or a newspaper that you would normally gloss over, that maybe take a point of view that you're not comfortable with, or maybe even opposed to, and start with an open mind and try to read those things without judging them. Start easy with that. Okay. Or watch a television news program. Like if you watch the news, maybe pick a news source that's different from what you normally listen to or watch. Starting easy like that. And then putting yourself in situations with different people who you wouldn't normally hang out with, deliberately looking for situations that are different, and then graduate your way up. So for example, what I'm trying to do right now is find a scenario where we have I live in the Seattle area, and even over in my county, in Kitsap County, we have a significant unhoused population. It's no problem for me to hand somebody some food or to give them some items that I've had around the house that I don't need. So I can give material goods to people, but I've never sat down in a soup kitchen or a food bank and had a meal with a homeless person and really talked to them. So for me, that's a big step toward being more empathetic toward a population of people I know nothing about. But that's not the first thing I would suggest you do, that you work your way up to something like that. So, I'm part of Fish Line, which is a local charity around here in Kitsap County. And I'm going to work with them to find a way where I can actually go do that and not just donate money to Fish Line or just, give food and things to people who are unhoused. But, where can I go and actually serve a meal and then hang out? So there are steps you can take.
I just love that approach in general, right? And in fact, that wouldn't be if someone asked me, hey, how do I develop empathy? I wouldn't have been my first thing that I would say. Now I think it will be my first thing that I will say, which is put yourself in experiences in which you're experiencing other people that are different from you, have lived different lives, think differently, have different values, have different cultures, right? And I think that that sounds almost obvious, but I think we forget that, right? We forget to put ourselves into those positions that are often uncomfortable positions.
Well, yeah. I mean, even with my podcast, I'm looking for guests who are different than me, who don't have the same worldview I had. So I had Jolene Jang on my show, and she's an Asian inclusivity consultant. I know about this much about the Asian population. You know, I grew up in a white middle class neighborhood back in California. So to have her on the show and to have her explain things to me in a way that was instructive but eye-opening, was like, wow, okay, I need to do more of this. So there's things you can do within your sphere of influence to broaden your exposure.
Yeah. One thing that I found pretty useful, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this. Let me bounce this off you. But one thing I found useful, and a tool that I've used to help coach some other managers as well as individual contributors in the area just around empathy, it's almost like a reflection and a meditation, right? And it's kind of something that you can do, for example, prior to going into a conversation with somebody that you may not see eye to eye with, or that you have different values, or that you don't even like that person, right? Let's be real. That happens. We have to talk and manage people that we might not actually like. And the reflection is just, I think it's been titled kind of a just like me meditation, which is just stepping back and remembering kind of the shared human experience. I know this sounds, pretty touchy-feely to a lot of people. I find that it works because we get so caught up in the mix of our own lens and experience and what's going on with us that we forget to step back and think, this person wants to be happy in life just like me. This person wants love and connection just like me. This person wants to be respected just like me. This person has dreams, hopes, and ambitions in life just like me. This person has experienced setbacks and tragedies just like me. I mean, for me, that has gone a long way just to almost prime me for those conversations, to remember, actually, we're not that different. Whoever this person is, as long as they're a human being, we're not that different at some level. And I think remembering that can help you show up in a way in which you would hope someone would show up to you in whatever conversation. So that's worked for me. I don't know. Have you tried to implement something like that, or do you have anything similar, or what's your general take on that?
Well, similar, but not as profound as what you just shared. I recommend box breathing to folks. So if you want to calm yourself down before walking into a situation where there may be conflict or discomfort, breathing in for a count of 4, or whatever works for you. Breathe in for a count of 4, hold it for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, and do that several times. Yeah. So it all comes to me, what I'm learning about meditation, and I'm still really new at it, but what I'm learning is that a lot of meditation really does come down to breath, and just being very, very conscious of your breath, which then allows you kind of the mental space, the psychological space to do different things, to try different things, like be more empathetic or listen better.
I love that. I'm so glad that you brought up the breathing, just because it's something that I don't get to talk about very often. So now this is kind of my hobby horse. But I feel so often in any sort of leadership position, or just in life when we have to deal with other people in conflict, there's these physiological tools that are at our disposal that I think are becoming a bit more mainstream, at least in Western culture, that I wish was even more widely spread, right? So the box breathing, I love it. But just, I've also, I've used kind of what's called like the double inhale, exhale, or the physiological sigh, which is just actually like slowing down your nervous system in a sense, where you are in a more focused and calm state of mind. And gosh, it's such an easy thing, such an easy tool. And I think if everybody had that at their disposal, oh my gosh, it would go a long ways. So I love the again, the physiological tools here. Now, staying with empathy here. So outside of putting yourself in new experiences with new kinds of people that are different from you, getting yourself out of your comfort zone in that area, reflecting on our shared human experience. How else could somebody then develop empathy, or maybe rather practice empathy in real time? Meaning, because whenever I talk about an adaptive skill, I talk about the external work and the internal work, right? Internal stuff are things that I am doing that other people can't see to change my attitude, my relationship to an experience, such as putting myself in new experiences to gain some empathy. On the behavioral side, it's the way I'm actually going to show up to appear empathetic. And I think that we should encourage people to show up empathetic, even if you're not necessarily there yet in feeling super empathetic. So that's a really long question. In fact, it wasn't even a question. There was no question mark there. But are there behaviors that you help people work through to show up empathetically?
Some things that I would suggest to folks would include eye contact. Because if you want to show somebody respect, look them in the eye. Not staring somebody down, not looking at them hard, but eye contact. And so I do that even with Zoom calls. So I bought a special camera called a center cam. So my camera is actually down on my monitor. So my camera is right over the top of your head. So I can look you in the eye, and it looks like I'm really looking you in the eye because my camera is moved. It's in a different place. So eye contact for one thing. I think watching your body language, watching your tone of voice, and watching your word choice are all really important to demonstrating empathy. If you want behavioral artifacts, I'm going to give you eye contact. I'm going to give you the respect of eye contact. I'm going to watch my body language to make sure that I'm not appearing defensive. Like I like to cross my arms, but because it's comfortable, because it feels good. But that makes me look defensive. And so watching that and trying to keep my hands out of my pockets, for example, so that I look open and receptive is something that I'm really working on. I'm a professional talker. That's what I do. I'm a facilitator. So if I get upset, that comes out in my voice. My kids know this really, really well. I will raise my voice and it's usually not pleasant. So watching my tone of voice behaviorally, the way I'm speaking is important. And then word choice, what words am I going to use? And maybe more importantly, what words am I not going to use? You, always, never, name calling, labeling, things like that. Just keep those out of your discussions. And you're going to come across as more empathetic and more open and more receptive to the person you're talking to. Those are just a few ideas.
Love that. Yeah. To my ear, it's really what you're demonstrating through those behaviors or subtraction of certain behaviors is care and respect, which obviously there's a lot of overlap with empathy with care and respect. In fact, probably direct overlap. And so, yeah, I mean, all these things that you mentioned, hey, making eye contact, right? Nodding the head when people are talking to you to show that you're tracking, right? Paraphrasing what they're saying. The empathetic reflection, which is with paraphrasing, of course, I'm tracking the content of what you're saying. With empathetic reflection, I'm actually tracking your experience. And such as, and you don't have to agree with what someone is saying to have an empathetic reflection, right? That can be wow, that sounds really difficult. Or gosh, that must have really sucked. Or that must have been really exciting for you, right? These things are, I think, what demonstrate the care and respect. And just to go down a little bit more of a tangent on this, and then I want to move on to the psychological transition, of course. But in our Managing with Mind and Heart program, on day one, we talk about this thing called the psychological contract. And basically, the point here is that effective managers consistently demonstrate that they have their employees' best interests at heart. And so the psychological contract is, hey, the more you invest in me, the more willing and able I am to volunteer my heart and brain into you, this work, this team. And there's some really interesting a survey from it was Limeade Institute white paper. It's called The Science of Care. There's a survey in September 2019. And according to this survey, when employees feel cared about, they are 60% plan to stay at their company for at least 3 years, which in this day and age, that's pretty good. 90% are likely to recommend this organization as a great place to work. And 94% say they feel personally engaged in their work. And here's the zinger, I think. 94% say 94% say they have well-being in their lives when they feel cared about at work. All right. So what I like to remind managers, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is you're actually in a position to actually help people improve their lives. Right. So if you can remember that, as well as the goal that you're here to help this team do great work together, I think that's a really cool combination.
One of the things I talk about at the top of my my Cornerstone management program is the fact that managers have more of an influence on people's quality of life than their therapist and their spouses.
Wow.
So yeah,
really? Wow.
A phrase that I use a lot is that managers define reality for their employees. You know, whether you like your job or not, whether you're productive or not, whether you're happy or not, inside and outside of work often comes down to the manager. So the manager has a really important role, and it's something to be conscious of.
Yeah. And that reminds me of actually a McKinsey study. So McKinsey actually found that relationships with managers is the top factor in employees' job satisfaction. Mm-hmm. Which is the second most important determinant of employees' overall well-being. So it adds up there, right? And in a sense, there is some impact and responsibility for people's well-being, which I gotta say, as a brand new manager, that can seem a little bit scary and a little bit daunting. And so, hey, maybe this is the right transition, or maybe this is an awkward transition, but I think that leads us into talking a bit more about the psychological transition in general, right? So talk to me more about that. How do you view that transition? How is it best done?
Well, I think the first thing is mindset. The first thing is to, as I said at the top of the show, it's important for folks to realize that you are moving from something and to something. And there's a big chasm in between them. So I'm moving from being an employee, an individual contributor responsible for a list of tasks, to a leader who is responsible for getting things done through others. And so sort of letting the old things go, or finding a way to delegate those, or to not let them take so much precedence. You also need to consider that as an individual contributor, you really mostly are only concerned with what your boss thinks of you and your performance. As a manager, you have three constituencies, I call them. You've got your employees, you've got your boss, and you've got your peers. And you need to consider the fact that these three constituencies are going to want vastly different things from you, and they may conflict. So being ready to have those conversations, to meet with your constituencies, to meet with your stakeholders, and to find out what they need from you, and to set up a communication environment that works for all three of these constituencies, I think is very important. So those are just a couple of things I encourage folks to think about as they make this transition. And then the last thing that I talk about in this is the percentage of time you need to be focused on different sorts of tasks. So you've got individual contributor tasks, like doing a particular job or a task. You've got managing others, responsibility for others' tasks, and then you've got strategic tasks. And depending on where you are in the food chain, the balance of those things is different. So in my book, I offer percentages, but I also put a big caveat in there that they're not hard and fast. Just the point is that as you move up the food chain, you need to be focused more and more on strategy and less on tactics. And a lot of new managers forget that, or they never got that memo. And so they keep trying to focus on, you know what, I'm the best engineer. That's why I got promoted. So I'm just going to do that even more. And that's the wrong approach.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Now, I'm curious, Eric, at a kind of at a practical level here, if I'm a brand new manager, say I'm not moving into upper management, I'm not a director of a large department or a C level at this point, but I'm moving up to the first time into middle management, say. With that psychological transition, what steps should I be taking to help myself through that transition?
I would suggest the first thing you do is get to know your team really well. So make sure that you know all the folks on your team and find out what their strengths are and find out what their weak spots are as well. One of the things I talk about is having new managers do a SWOT analysis of their team. And SWOT is a 2x2 matrix: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Would definitely suggest doing a SWOT analysis to kind of understand how the team is doing, and what assets have you got on your side, and what are the opportunities and threats that may be either internal or external to the team that you need to be aware of. So that would be the first thing I do, is some kind of an inventory. Something else to consider is understanding the Tuckman model of team development. So this guy, Bruce Tuckman, was an absolute guru back in the day. He came up with a couple of different models of team development. The one that I use is just forming, storming, norming, and performing. And those words are so obvious that in class, I usually don't even define them. I just put people into an activity right away and say, okay, what's going on when the team is forming? What's going on when the team is storming, and so on. Later on, Tuckman added a fifth stage, which was adjourning, which I don't use, but it's something that he did come up with. Anyway, I would just be looking out for, how's the team doing? You come on as a new manager, you've probably inherited a team, and they're probably going to go through all 4 stages. And so understanding what to expect when a team is forming with you in it. Storming, we're trying to figure out what's going on and who's who and what's the pecking order and who's doing what. Norming, where we're starting to settle into a rhythm, and performing, where we're hitting on all cylinders. Understanding what to expect in each of those 4 stages is very instructive for a new manager. So that's very useful. So I would say do a SWOT analysis and understand your team's strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, and be on the lookout for the 4 stages of team development.
Yeah. How would one go about kind of understanding where their team is at? I mean, so let's assume that this is not a team that you've necessarily been a part of before and you were promoted from within, but would that be something that you would kind of implement through some one-on-one conversations? Do you have some other approaches that you like to use to get that data, right? To get that information?
Yeah, absolutely. One-on-ones are crucial.
Mm-hmm.
I really spend a lot of time on one-on-ones in my programs. I offer folks a template. I spend a lot of time talking about how sacred one-on-one time is, and how important getting on a regular drumbeat with your direct reports, each one of them, once a week, once every other week, for a half hour or an hour. You work it out, but make sure that there's a drumbeat that you and your employee can count on, where you can talk about things, how things are going, and bond. You need to bond with your team members. They need to bond with you. They need to feel a sense of trust and respect and safety with you. And the only way you get that is with regular, repeated contact. So one-on-ones are huge.
Yeah. Well, we are singing off the same sheet of music with that one. I spent a lot of time on one-on-ones, and I mean, it seems pretty clear. I remember there was a, Microsoft maybe a few years ago did a giant kind of study of their employee base and was really looking at, hey, what were the factors contributing to the most miserable employees versus the not so miserable employees. I think there's actually a New York Times article called the Mystery of the Miserable Employee, which I think is a hilarious name at the end of the day. But one thing they found, at least within Microsoft, and this seems right to me, is that one of the strongest predictors of success for middle managers was they held frequent one-on-ones with their direct reports. And I like what you said with those one-on-ones, because that is the opportunity to get some of that data if you're doing a type of SWOT analysis, right? Getting that information on an individual level and then connecting those dots. But you also touched on, hey, it's an opportunity to connect, to show that care and respect, to build psychological safety between you and your team. And so I always like to encourage managers to have kind of a balance. It's a task person balance, as I would call it, right? Hey, yeah, spend some time talking about how they're doing, not only in their lives, if that's something they like to talk about. Everybody has a different preference there. But, how are they doing in the job, right? What are their career development hopes and aspirations? What is their view on the culture and team dynamics? And so I like, a whole bunch of, I guess, in your book, do you have section on one-on-one with any sort of resources about how to conduct those meetings or any other resources available?
I offer a template on how to conduct a one-on-one. And I hold it loosely, because, I offer a suggestion for things that you might want to talk about with your employees, but the key point is to just do it. Just connect frequently, regularly, and have some quality time together.
I love that. I think that's a general great approach and great thing to keep in mind. Just do it, right? Don't overthink it, or it makes it harder to actually get it done. Very cool. Eric, let's talk about delegation. And, speaking for myself here, this has been one of my, I think, most challenging things to wrap my head around as a manager in different positions. I think I've kind of vacillated between taking things on too much and just kind of owning it and taking responsibility for things and ending up with too much on my plate, and then which my employees don't have a lot on their plate, as well as I think at times kind of over delegating in a way that it kind of rubbed people wrong. And so with delegation, how should a new manager be thinking about this? Where would you start with that?
Okay, so I would suggest gathering up all of your tasks, all the things that you do, put them into a nice package, and then throw them over the fence at your employees.
All right, done.
Yeah, done. No, totally kidding. Totally kidding.
Send Eric emails about how that works for you. I'm sure he'll love that. No.
Yeah, absolutely. So my serious answer is I would encourage folks, and what I do in class is I encourage folks to write down a list of everything that they're currently doing, all the tasks, all the things. And once you get that all written out, and for some folks, that's a very long list. So, I want to have sympathy for the fact that some folks are very, very busy. Okay. Once you've got them all written out, and whether you handwrite them or use a doc, or whether you use a sheet, whatever it is, then determine which of those you can share with somebody else, because you may not be able to let go of it completely, and which of those you could actually hand off. So in order for you to know what you can hand off, you have to have done that team that team diagnostic to know who's got the skills, who needs to develop, who can I trust to make good decisions. So that's all part of a SWOT analysis, is just thinking about, okay, who's on the team and who, if I handed something to them, would take it and knock it out of the park, or who needs to develop a little bit, which means I'm going to have to invest time. A lot of new managers resist delegating because they say it takes too long. It's going to take me twice as long to get the thing done. If I just get in and do it, I could be done with it in half an hour and be through. If I delegate it to Ethan, it's going to take 4 hours. I don't have that kind of time. Well, my response to that is yes, it will take longer the first time, but consider that an investment. And that investment is going to pay off humongous dividends, because once I teach Ethan how to take care of using the correct cover sheet on the CPS reports or whatever it is, once I make that investment and teach you how to do it and guide you and coach you, then you can A, do it yourself without supervision, and B, teach somebody else how to do it. So now I'm getting leverage off of that investment. I'm getting returns off that investment. So that's the mindset I try to get people into, is delegation is intense work and it's an investment. So it will pay off. You will get returns on that investment. So that's really the mindset I take when it comes to delegation is, let's list all the things. What can you share? What can you actually delegate? And then just have that mindset of, yeah, it probably will take longer to begin with, but it's gonna pay off dividends in the future. And there also might be grieving. For example, when I started Girard Training Solutions, I thought, hey, I can do all the things. I'm a smart guy. I can design, develop, and deliver the training. I can do the branded PowerPoint decks for clients. I can do the bookkeeping. I can do the website. I can do all the things. And the first thing I realized was, as much as I loved playing with my website, it was a huge time suck because I was not up to speed on it. So I was spending a lot of time and making mistakes. So even though I liked playing with the website, I had to have Sandra take it over. Then the second thing was I was doing my books and I was using QuickBooks Self-Employed. So easy, such a great user interface. I loved it. Then I handed my books to an accountant who gave me in exchange $1,000 bill for all the work that they had to do to clean up my mistakes. So I thought, okay, I'm not a bookkeeper. I'm handing this off. So yeah, you may grieve a little bit, but it will be a huge relief when you can then focus on those things that only you can do. So the stuff I do for GTS is only stuff I can do, and I delegate the rest. Is it always perfect? No. Is it exactly the way I would have done it? No way. But I trust the people I'm delegating to, and I know that they'll do their best, and it's going to be good enough. And I can do what I can do, and they do what they do, and everybody's happy.
Yeah, and I like that general, I guess, North Star of what are things that kind of only that I can do. And so let me focus on that. And, you touched on something that really resonated with me. And again, I think could resonate with a lot of managers. I don't want to paint with too broad strokes here, but in a lot of cases, the type of person that would be promoted to manager, even if that's because, hey, they were a really great project man, a really great salesperson or a great accountant, are usually the people that are proactive, right? That can take a task, figure it out well, master it and do so effectively and efficiently. And so it's coming back to that psychological transition again, which I know we're still covering, which is, your job, this is, again, paraphrasing something you said earlier, your job is no longer to necessarily take care of tasks, but it's to help your, team thrive. And I really appreciate how you said that there is a grieving moment to that, right? It's almost like going through those 5 stages of grief, where there is a denial stage that this is something that you, shouldn't be doing. And then, all the other stages. And so I think that's hard for a lot of people because they're high achievers and they've got successful and they've gotten to this point because they are taskmasters, right? They can just take things and get them done. With that said, I'd imagine there is, I guess, depending on the structure of the team and the organization, I work with a lot of managers, as I'm sure you do, where you are not, as a manager, you are not just responsible for helping the team thrive and therefore delegating. You also are, quote unquote, a working manager that needs to do things yourself. And so with that said, what could be some questions that you would ask your team in your one-on-ones or group meetings to help figure out where you can best be of service versus where they should kind of handle some of these tasks? I know it's a broad question, but I know a lot of people kind of struggle with this, figure out what I should do and what others should do.
Yeah, that takes me into coaching. And it takes me specifically to Michael Bungay Stanier's book, The Coaching Habit.
I love that. Yeah, I love that book.
Yeah, and I'd be asking the 7 questions that he talks about. Maybe having a manager guided coaching discussion where basically what you're trying to get at is, what are you doing? What are you up to? How confident and competent are you in these things? And what else do you need from me? Just leaving it that broad. What do you need from me at this point? Could be nothing. I'm fine. Could be, I do not understand this. Please, can you explain it again? But by using coaching skills to get the team member to talk to you, you're less likely to micromanage, and you're more likely to get them bought in when it's time to delegate them something or assign them something. You're more likely to have their buy-in because they had a say in the conversation. Ideally, they spoke more than you did.
Well, hey, I would encourage people to go check out that book. That is a really good book for any manager, regardless of experience. So I'll link to that in the show notes, along with Eric's book, of course. Eric, I'm wondering, coming back to your story about, one of your first management positions, it sounded like you were promoted from within a team, right? So you went from, peer to manager, which is a really hard transition for a lot of people, right? Because, in some ways, there's a lot of benefits to that. You understand the dynamics a bit better. You understand the team, the personnel. Hopefully you have some good relationships already built. And on other levels, it's really difficult because that's hard for people that were once your peer to then look up to you as someone that's now a manager. Do you have any specific advice for those situations? Like, does any of your general principles here change in the face of being promoted from within?
No, the principles stay the same. Mm-hmm. The trick that I would suggest is this is a piece that comes from my oldest friend / publicist. When I interviewed him for the book, he said, "Okay, one thing to remember is you're no longer part of the gang anymore. So as soon as you're promoted, you can no longer, shoot the breeze the way you used to, go out for drinks the way you used to. I mean, you can, but you're in a different role. So having explicit conversations with folks saying, look, things have changed. I still want to be friends with you, but we have a different relationship now." And having that explicit conversation that lets folks know that, I still like you. We still have that background together, and things are different. So there's going to be a new set of expectations, and I want you along for this ride. I want you to stick with me. But we need to understand that the situation is different. So being explicit and having that conversation is job one.
I don't know about you, but this is one of the questions I often get during workshops, which is, well, I was friends with some of these people that are now my employees. Like, they were at my wedding, right? I'm not all of them, but like a couple of them, they're really good friends of mine. How do I navigate that now? Because in a sense, and it's no mystery to everybody else that you were friends before you got promoted to manager. And I don't think you can rightfully ask someone to be like, "Hey, I know we were friends. Thanks for coming to my wedding, but we can't be friends anymore because I'm your manager." And so I think in those situations, I would say the guiding light, at least for me, would be that friendship should not show up at work any more than it does with any other employee there. Meaning you can't be going to lunch with your friends, every other day. Right? Time is a commodity. You have to remember that in a management position. If you're hanging out on the weekends, you're not coming to work talking about the great play that you saw together or the football game you went and saw. Right? That friendship there should be no appearance of favoritism in the workplace. And because of that, I think, you have to have specific conversation with all the people that were once your peers, but even more pointed conversations with those that are your friends, right? I can't share inside information. There's a boundary here. And so I get that question a lot. That's usually my best response at this point. And I like some of the things you said it well. Would there be anything else that you would add to that? I guess advice you would give to somebody that has friends that they're now managing?
Well, one thing to consider is if you think that this is going to be too difficult, if having a friend on the team is going to be too difficult and you're not going to be able to separate that out, maybe talking about maybe having that person join a different team. That's a big move, and it could be really, really scary. But if it preserves your relationship and safeguards both of you from accidentally getting into a situation where there may be favoritism, that might be something to consider. I mean, sure. I've been lucky enough to not have like a really close friend on my team in the corporate world. In my world now, as I mentioned, Bill is my oldest friend. We've known each other since junior year of high school. And that goes, we've known each other longer than we haven't. So we've known each other a long, long time. And it's really interesting. It's like without really, I think we had a 5-minute conversation about it, but really without discussing it, we switch hats. So this is my friend hat. And as your friend, I will insult you and call you names, and we will share jokes that go back 30 years, and that's fine. And then when it's time to do business, that hat comes off. And when we're talking about writing an article or proofreading an article or who to submit work to for a magazine, it's all business. And then when the work is done, then the hats switch again. But it's really interesting, and it was, I think it's, I got lucky with Bill. I got lucky because we didn't have to have hours and hours of conversations about it. It's like, hey, you're my friend first. If the work starts to get in the way of our friendship, then I will fire you, or I will encourage you to leave because you're my friend first. So that was like a 5-minute conversation, and it's never been a problem since. But I will say again, I got lucky with that. I think in other cases, it may take a series of conversations where you kind of negotiate your relationship at work and outside of work.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation that many people find themselves in. But I think that's those are some good guiding lights on that. Well, Eric, let me try to land this plane here. We're running out of time. I'm curious, though, when did you write this book, Lead Like a Pro?
I started it at the beginning of the year, and
okay,
I sat down for an hour a day, every day for 6 or 7 months, and put together all my best stuff, and put it together. So it launched September 20th.
Wow. Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that's a lot of hard work and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
It was.
So congratulations. Well, the book looks amazing. Like I said, I've gotten some glimpses of the content in it. I'm excited to read it. Again, the book is Lead Like a Pro, The Essential Guide for New Managers. It just came out in September, so maybe this question is a dead end, but I'm curious now that the book has been out in the world for a little bit. Has there been anything based on feedback that you've gotten from anybody, or just based on your, growth and development as a human being and leader? Is there anything that you would have wished that was in there that is not in there right now, or anything that you would revise at this point? I always like to ask that question with those that are authors.
You know what? I'm actually really happy with it. It was my first real effort at a book, and I'm going to take a rest now because I'm tired. But if I had it to do over again, I would probably do things a little bit differently. But for my first effort, I'm really happy. It hit Amazon #1 bestseller and #1 new release.
Congratulations.
So it did really well out of the gate. I'm writing a course based on it, and that course will be available to the public, as well as I'll take it inside companies as well. So I'm pretty happy with it for a first effort.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. Congratulations. Maybe we'll connect again in a year and see where you're at then. But no, that's awesome. Again, folks, go get the book.
It's at Amazon, and then your favorite bookstore can order it for sure.
Perfect. Well, again, I'll link to that in the show notes. And Eric, where could people learn more about you, find your course and other goodies?
Yeah. So easiest to find me on LinkedIn. I'm Eric P. Girard on LinkedIn. You can check out all about me and my courses at girardtrainingsolutions.com. I've got a podcast called Management Development Unlocked, which I would love to have you on. Yeah.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah. I would say LinkedIn, my website, and the podcast would be the way to go.
Terrific. Well, once again, I'll link to all of that in the show notes, folks, so you can find it all there. Eric, let me leave our audience with this, which is, hey, if our when we covered, this was a fairly wide-ranging conversation today. I certainly learned a lot, and I have some takeaways from this. But if our listeners were to only take away, hey, one or two things from this conversation today, what would you hope those would be?
I'm going to quote Brene Brown for this one.
Always love that. Yeah, please.
She's one of my heroes. Absolutely.
Same.
My favorite quote from Brene Brown is simply, "Clear is kind, unclear is unkind." So be clear with your folks. Don't leave anything on the table.
Eric, thank you. Thank you for your time today. Thanks for coming on the show. I'll plug it one more time, folks. Go check out his book. And besides that, I hope we talk again soon.
Thank you, Ethan. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye now.
Hey, folks, wait. Don't go yet. Please, stay with me for 1 second here. I want to let you know about a couple cool little goodies that we have available for you. If you dig this podcast, you will probably also dig our Managing with Mind and Heart newsletter. This is a monthly newsletter where we share articles that we write about, hey, how to thrive as a manager, how to lead teams that are characterized by high morale, engagement, psychological safety, care and respect, collaboration, and high performance. You can sign up for this newsletter by texting the word leading to the number 66866. Additionally, you can go to our website and sign up for the newsletter there. Our website is www.nashconsulting.com. And of course, if you're not already aware, we have our cornerstone program for leaders and managers, and it is called Managing with Mind and Heart. Go figure. This program is something that we often bring into organizations to work with all their leaders on helping them get aligned and singing off the same sheet of music with best practice management skills and behaviors. We've brought this to hundreds of organizations at this point with really good results. And if you are not able or inclined to bring our program in-house, twice a year, in the spring and in the fall, we offer this 6-day Managing with Mind and Heart leadership development program online for anybody that would like to sign up and join us. To learn more about this online course and to register, you can go to our website. Once again, that's nashconsulting.com. Or send us an email at contact@nashconsulting.com. All right, that's all. That's it. See you later. Bye.